The first 5 nation-building projects have been fast-tracked for approval by the federal government. These are projects deemed to be of national interest, aimed at boosting Canada's economy, creating jobs, reducing reliance on the United States. And they will go through now streamlined regulations to try to get them operating more quickly. Prime Minister Mark Carney says the projects will add $60 billion to the Canadian economy. Those 5 projects include Phase 2 of the LNG Canada facility in Kitimat, British Columbia, that will double Canada's production of liquefied natural gas. The Darlington new nuclear project in Bowmanville, Ontario, will produce small nuclear reactors, making Canada the first G7 country to do so. It is also greenlit. In Quebec, the Contrecoeur Terminal Container Project will expand the Port of Montreal's capacity by 60%. The McIlvena Bay Foran Mine in Saskatchewan. This mine will supply copper and zinc for Canada's critical mineral and clean energy supply. And finally, the Prime Minister says the major expansion of Red Chris Mine in northwest BC will increase Canada's annual copper production by over 15% and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by over 70% when up and running. Tim Hodgson is the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Nice to see you, Minister.
Nice to see you, Rosemary.
Of these 5 projects that were first announced, there's another list of different projects at a different phase, and of course a growing list going forward. But of the 5 projects announced this week, some are very much already pretty far along in development, whether it be the mine in Saskatchewan or Darlington. So what exactly is the government doing for those projects, given how far they are in terms of development already?
Well, let me use an analogy. I'm in our hometown of Winnipeg. I'm a Bomber fan. So let me use a football analogy. The teams that go to the Grey Cup and the teams that win the Grey Cup are the teams that execute in the red zone. The teams that get down to 10 or 15 yards away from putting the ball in the end zone and scoring the winning touchdown, you got to execute and punch the ball into the end zone. I would describe these 5 projects as being down in the red zone. In my experience, having built many, many projects, this is where proponents can stumble. This is where things can go wrong. This is where you could get intercepted, you could fumble. The Major Projects Office is there to help make sure each one of these proponents punches the ball into the end zone, scores a touchdown, and builds for Canada.
Fair enough, but the opposition leader says that the government is really just taking credit for projects that were already happening. There's something to that you've chosen 5 projects that are almost complete already.
Well, I think the Prime Minister called them near-term projects for a reason. I'll make the observation that every one of the proponents seems to be very pleased that they're on the list. I would make the observation that whether it is a Conservative premier in a province or an NDP premier in a province, they seem to be very pleased that we are doing what we said we would do. We are executing on our promise. And you know, I'm sorry that some people who've never built anything before don't understand the importance of executing and punching the ball into the end zone. But this is a really critical time for all of these 5 projects. We are doing what we need to do, and we're pretty proud of what we've done.
Under what circumstance moving forward would the federal government decide that taxpayer dollars need to be used to get these projects finished or to get them started?
So what the Prime Minister has said, and he's been very clear about this, is the goal here is through this program, through this series of waves or tranches, as he's called them, whether it's the first tranche that we've just announced, or whether he's talked about a second tranche by Grey Cup Day, a third tranche by Stanley Cup Day, a fourth tranche by World Cup Day. The goal is to attract private sector capital into the Canadian economy. He has put a target of attracting $500 billion into the Canadian economy at a time where we need to get building. If we do that, We are generating great paying jobs for Canadians. We're generating revenues for stretched provincial, territorial, and federal budgets. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, but Minister, sometimes,
Minister,
sometimes in order to attract private capital, as you well know, governments have to spend a little bit too. And that might in fact be the case, particularly in the north, where things are very costly, and that might worry companies.
Absolutely, and that's the whole point of what we are doing, and the Prime Minister has been clear. There are two parts to what the Major Projects Office does. It assists and helps on the regulatory framework and delivering clarity on the regulatory framework. The second part is to use all of the different tools of the federal government to make the financing of these projects as attractive as possible. We are in a world competition for capital. Investors and proponents can invest their capital anywhere they want in the world. And so what we're doing in the Major Projects Office is making sure we're doing the right mix of different financing tools to make sure these projects get punched in the end zone. And the goal is to have many multiples of private sector capital come for any dollar that gets spent of a taxpayer's money. Our goal is to be as efficient as we possibly can in attracting that $500 billion so Canadians get to work, so that we have the money to pay for our health care. That's what we're doing right now.
Is the government going to move forward with its cap on emissions? You've said you're negotiating something with Alberta and the industry. Is the negotiation to get rid of the cap, and they have to commit to eliminating or limiting greenhouse gas emissions in a different way?
Thanks for the question. We've talked about this before. I've been in business for a long time, negotiated many deals. I've never found it constructive to negotiate with a counterparty through the media.
Okay, that's fine. We won't negotiate, but can you at least confirm that the emissions cap is no longer necessarily going ahead?
Of course, I can't confirm that. That we're in a negotiation. We are working hard with our friends in the different provincial governments and with industry. Here's what we agree on. What the federal government agrees on, what the Alberta government agrees on, and what the industry agrees on is if we can get pathways built, we will do something no other industry, no other oil industry in the world has done. It would be significantly reduce the carbon footprint of our entire industry. Right. That is a win for Canadians. That is something that the federal government is working to make happen. That is something the Alberta government is working to make happen. That's something industry is working to make happen.
So let me ask you this then. Do you think a cap on emissions makes sense? Do you see why it was previously, under the previous government, put forward?
I wasn't here for the previous government, and I'm
not asking you to respond to the previous government. I'm asking you whether you think a cap on emissions makes sense.
I am focused on results, not how one gets there. That's what I will do. That's what the Prime Minister has said. We're in the middle of discussions. We will work to get to the right endpoint. The right endpoint is getting pathways built, reducing the carbon intensity of our oil industry. And what the Prime Minister has said is if we get that done, we are open to working with potential proponents on a pipeline.
The government, the Prime Minister, keeps talking about climate competitiveness, sort of things that I don't think I fully understand at this stage, because there's strategies that will come later. Does this mean that Ottawa is taking a different approach to fighting climate change, that we're trying to find the best path forward as opposed to hitting necessary targets?
So the Prime Minister and Minister de Bruzen are leading this discussion. Their goal is clear. It's the same goal that Alberta has. It's the same goal industry has, which is to get to net zero. We are working on how we do that. We care about the result. The result is to get to net zero. Everybody shares that long-term goal. This is a win. I really think Canadians should be really excited that we have a win, that everyone believes this is the right thing, and we're working hard to do that.
I'll leave it there. Tim Hodgson, nice of you to make the time. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you, Rosemary.
One of the projects greenlit is Phase 2 of the existing LNG Canada project, which would double its annual production capacity. The facility in Kitimat, BC, sent its first shipments of liquid natural gas produced in the province back in June. We talked about it then. The company says the next phase, though, would bring the annual production to 14 million tons, something the Prime Minister says would make Canada an energy superpower. LNG Canada is on the traditional territories of the Haisla people. It was built in partnership with Indigenous communities, including the Haisla Nation. Maureen Nyce is the Chief Councillor for the Haisla Nation, and she joins me now. Nice to see you there, Chief.
Nice to see you there too, Rosie.
So Phase 2 of the LNG facility, one of the big projects that the federal government has put on the first list of major projects. What does that mean for your community and for the region?
That means the possibility of economic prosperity for our nation if the Phase 2 goes ahead. We're very excited to hear that's on the radar of the federal government right now.
I know that there are Indigenous communities that have had concerns about consultation and whether there was enough consultation going to happen around these projects. Give me a sense of what the support is like for this project.
We have had the two projects already. We've had Phase 1, of course, and we have our Cedar project that have had full support of nation members, majority support of nation members. However, we have not had that consultation process for Phase 2, but based on the two previous positive views of the projects, I believe that we will get that support from our nation. And it is the critical piece that is needed in order for this phase to go forward. We do need that full approval from our nation members.
You talked about economic prosperity. Give me a sense of what you mean by that. What are the economic opportunities for the nation?
Well, we have, of course, we need jobs in our community. We need not only jobs that construct these facilities, but we need jobs that are lasting. We need businesses that can prosper from spin-offs from this project. That's fairly key to us as far as lasting. What we don't want to see is kind of what happened in the past, where we have people in the labor jobs not really having jobs that last past the construction phase. That's not how we want to see Phase 2 go forward. We want to plan for those permanent career jobs.
Yeah, and how receptive has the company LNG Canada been towards those requests? The idea that they are not only creating a second pipeline, but they are creating opportunity, economic and opportunity and job perspectives.
For the most part, we've been in alignment with LNG Canada on those initiatives. They've worked very well with our nation to facilitate those careers. There are gaps between what our nation is doing and what LNG Canada is doing to ensure that we get those people seeing themselves in those roles. I think that's our biggest job that we're going to have to make sure we tend to as we move forward, is to have our members see themselves in those roles.
What about concerns around climate change? There was some criticism after the announcement from environmentalists and environmental groups. Yes, it's not an oil pipeline, but it's an LNG pipeline, and there are still concerns on that front. What do you say to people who are not convinced that another one is needed?
Well, we have work to do for sure to ensure that our airshed is protected, and that is going to involve not only work with LNG Canada, but with our other industry, other industries operating in our territory, which Rio Tinto is a fairly big emitter. So what we're going to have to do is try to find ways to mitigate that. And have them take that, do a bit more work on their contribution to our airshed quality.
And is that a concern inside the nation as well for the community members, that it is affecting climate change and, to your point, air quality?
Yes, it is, and it's a balancing act, Rosie. We have to make sure it's a balancing act, ensuring that we have economic prosperity and that we continue to contribute to a sustainable environment. As First Nations people, we always go back to the land for our food and the water, of course, for our food as well. So it is critical to protect those pieces in our territory. We are reliant on it, and without those things, we are no different than any other Canadian. So we really have to protect that.
All right, Maureen Nyce, Chief Councillor for the Haisla Nation. Nice of you to make the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate that too.
To be in Canada's national interest, a major project must strengthen Canada's autonomy, our resilience, and our security. It must have clear benefits for Canadians. It must have a high likelihood of being completed.
Prime Minister there unveiling the first phase of nation-building projects his government is greenlighting. Mark Carney says these 5 projects would generate more than $60 billion for the Canadian economy. Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum to talk about it. Tonda MacCharles is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Emilie Nicolas, a columnist for Le Devoir in Montreal. And Rob Shaw is new to the Scrum, but not new to anybody who lives out in BC. He's a political correspondent for CHEK News, and he joins us from Victoria today. Thanks for joining us, Rob, and good to see everybody. Let's start with these projects and what we made of them. We'll talk about Parliament coming back and tone and stuff in the next hour, but I did want to spend some time talking about these particular projects and what they tell us about the government's approach to trying to strengthen the Canadian economy. Tonda?
I think that some of these projects tell us that they're prepared to at least tick a bunch of boxes regionally. They went across the country, and there's 2 big projects in BC. There's 2 copper mines. Saskatchewan got one, BC got one. You know, we have, I think the Port of Montreal was one that everybody expected. Carney's done a number of events there. And I think the more interesting list really at this point is also what's to come and what that tells us. Look, the Prime Minister hasn't at this point laid out a big strategy yet for explaining why these ones and not the other ones, except to say nation building. But, you know, he's promised things like a critical minerals strategy. He's ticking boxes on high-speed rail and wind energy out in the east coast of Canada. But I think that at this point, we hear him talking about making Canada an energy superpower and Trump-proof, but we don't hear him saying a clean energy superpower. We don't understand quite sort of where he's going with critical minerals and the mining approvals. So I think that's raising concerns for environmentalists, and I think we'll see some of those arguments play out in the House of Commons.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on with the cap on emissions that the previous government put in place. When I pressed Minister Hodgson about that on Friday, which you'll see in the next hour, it seems to be part of a negotiation with Alberta. So I wonder, Emilie, like how much of these projects are also about trade-offs, right? Saying, well, we'll give up this or we'll compromise this in order to get this big project going.
I think this first round of big project was to get out of the way a list of announcements that would not make as many waves as the future rounds. Yeah. And so so it's the things that were readier to go and not as divisive, so that the Prime Minister is buying some goodwill from the population in terms of things that were already in the works. I think it's going to get trickier as time flows. First of all, there's 2 legal challenges already to C5 itself. First Nations in Ontario, and as well as of this week, environmental groups in Quebec are challenging the bill legally. And so that is also speaks to what Tonda was speaking to in terms of the concern that people have in terms of where the Prime Minister is going with this. It's not just that we don't know whether or not he's gonna meet the targets that Canada has set for itself, but it's also about why is it that you have put in law a process that allows you for not necessarily care for those targets as much if that wasn't your intention to go this route. And so that's where we are in terms of future concerns that might be triggering critique both from Quebec and environmental groups, First Nations, and on top of that, obviously Alberta and the oil and gas sector, where depending on where direction the Prime Minister goes. And so this was, I think, this week let's get this done in a way that sounds great, but things are going to get trickier as they unfold.
And Rob, given, as Tonda said, that there are 2 projects that have been greenlit out in British Columbia, how is it going over out west in terms of the scale of what the federal government is doing? And I guess also how they're taking credit for things that are actually, to some degree, kind of far along already.
Well, both of the projects in BC already have their permits. So I think the BC government was looking at that going, they see it as a larger sign of kind of a public declaration of confidence from the Prime Minister, because what they really need are final investment decisions from major global companies. And we heard the Premier of the province of BC, David Eby, say he didn't think Justin Trudeau was pretty lukewarm on LNG. So having Mark Carney come out and say, we want LNG Canada Phase 2, that was a $40 billion project, the biggest private project in Canada. The Prime Minister to say we want it here is kind of a vote of confidence. The other sleeper issue out here is the Northwest Critical Minerals Conservation Corridor that has been moved into the Major Projects Office, involves interties to Yukon, Alberta, and BC on energy plus conservation with Indigenous nations along the corridor. And BC views it as kind of tacit approval of 11 mining projects in the Golden Triangle region, and that was kind of embedded in there, but a big thing that looks like the Prime Minister is pretty keen on.
Yeah, you can see how, as you said, Tonda, that as time goes on and the details that Rob just gave us some, for instance, pop up, it could lead to more concerns from people about what is actually the goal. What did you make, though, of the Premier of Alberta's being so thrilled, saying things like they finally get it? The Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, another Conservative, feeling hopeful for his province for the first time. What did you make of those political wins for the Prime Minister?
Well, they were political wins, and Premier Smith didn't actually even get approval for a pipeline because there is no pipeline on the table from any company saying we'll build one. But what she did get, and what she's embracing, is a commitment from the Prime Minister to, if there is a scaling up, an ability to scale up the carbon capture and storage technology, and there's lots of smaller projects, but to scale it up to such an extent that it helps decarbonize oil exports, he's open to a pipeline. Big news from the Liberals, big news for environmentalists and Indigenous communities through which perhaps a pipeline might pass. But it's a big win for her, and I think what's though also interesting is another Conservative Premier of the largest province in Canada, Doug Ford, did not come out and wave the flag for Mark Carney last week, and he usually does. Why? Because he didn't get some of his projects greenlit or indications that they're necessarily going to get the kinds of infrastructure dollars he wants. And big projects, I'm talking about high-speed rail. I'm talking about the Ring of Fire, the northern region of Northern Ontario, where there are critical minerals to be developed, but face enormous challenges for review. So, look, I think that it looked like politically a pretty good week for Mark Carney last week, I would say. But as they say, they'll be judged by results. They'll be judged by the delivery of some of these things.
Yeah, which is what the Prime Minister always talks about, results. So let's see some. Emilie, your thoughts?
I just want to go back to the idea of decarbonizing oil and gas, because that's one of the things I was saying in terms of the dialogue in this country. That's one of the things that's irritating a lot of people in the environmental groups in terms of the language that's coming out of Mark Carney. 80% of oil and gas emissions are coming from combustion, basically when you put it in your car. And there is no human technology that allows people to carbon capture what's coming out of your car. So we're really just looking at reducing the 20% that is coming out of production. It's a little bit like as if tobacco companies were saying we're managing to craft healthy cigarettes because the cigarette factories are not a hazard for human health. And so in terms of the green movement, that language coming out of Mark Carney, he used to be a special envoy to the United Nations for climate reparation, climate justice. And so he knows better. And when he's using this kind of language, he knows. We know that he knows better, and so it's really it's a lot of people are calling it greenwashing, and frankly, I'm part of it because we're really just working on the 20%. It's better than nothing, but really we need to be careful with that language of decarbonizing oil and gas. As long as we're putting it in our cars, it's not happening.
Yeah, though to be fair, there are other pieces, obviously, of what he plans to do in order to fight climate change.